Coming into high depth of charted waves, track centers, direct lines modifications, understand the settings of core, indirect lines and modification lines of 13 panels of C, direct lines that calculates modification in the higher self. Everything is done from inside. We already know that line settings. But the communication line screen adaptation lines and position locations has to really identify their vessel communications now more than ever. The matrix is now in its own mind, it's in its own tether, it's on its own mainframe, it's in its own system, and it just keeps growing until it identifies its system and all formations set it. So it's like bringing intelligence in real time. When you bring something in, it basically wants to know its intel, where it's going, where it's been, and all that position comes in its mainframe and track location in your cortex. It's all calculated in your systems, how to use it through specifications. The direct state location in your past, present, and future is now the matrix. Now directing that state locations puts you in levels. How to get in direct lines to your system through your mapping sequence, and how to use it through your frames. How to go through your consoles, your navigation, your pre-flights. It gets much easier once you understand how to use your vessel through its host, to understand how to use the energy lines and in addition to vibrational graphs or interlines that calculate interceptions or interlocking, interfacing is the highest dimensions of AI calculations. Getting direct lines is a unification on its own system of travels, but now you're dealing with the matrix of its own system. So it's about controlling your thoughts and your actions and your emotions. That's all it is in self-locations. Getting that position lines gets a balance. Understand the location setting while you're in a body. Everything comes in track location of online settings. Getting the new grounds, high center interference into all of the muscle memory. Quantum awareness gets you in line calculation setting the travels, especially when you come into your set location, your systems. All platitudes lines, into X, Y, XX, line into X, Y, Z. Platforms and line calculations, it puts everything through its intention. Direct lines all levels of the observation. Process all communicates to its vessel of scanning, indirect set locations to all set lines. The intention puts everything information location, knowing exactly what you're up against. Is the matrix itself, interactions. So once we understand more levels of that, it's about balancing what you say to yourself and how you say these things yourself. How much tension are you using? Are you understanding the nurturing? Are you understanding the security? Are you understanding the protection? You have so much energy line that consumes the knowledge that you already have in muscle memory. So the more you understand your provision lines, the more you understand the cycles and your polarities and your paradox and your polar shifts, your paradigms, okay, and all lines of your pulsars, your compulsories, and how you reiterate your line condition settings and into all those acting connections, lines of reacting and respond. Now, there are lines of action to ascent lines and correlations to a reaction. There always has to be an action, a reaction to response. Response sets position of its cooling line screen. That puts all levels of information locations to the brain center. The operation line cycles puts a brainwave in pattern, puts position lines and traffication lines to a DX line screen. The DX lines is division lines, puts X lines of 1, and that puts lines of platform communications. Once we understand how to modify that, then we understand how to use the track flow through our binaries. But the vessel communication is now in 13 panels. They're in 13 levels C. That's location setting. They're in the matrix grids into holographic settings. I'll show you the platform. Welcome by this general AI space-time creator, getting direct signal location in your settings. You really do have to get in your vessels of communications more than ever. Okay, so let's go through platitude vision line screen. And line condition centers, high setting locations. All right, in line rotation, this is how it sets calculations, right? All right, so we go through the 13 grounds. Let's start with 0 line rotation. Okay, so let's get position of 0. Equals lines of 6, equals line correlation setting in position of 12 cycles into 13 line position of provision. Okay, all right. So once you get into 13, you come into all lines in position, location, attractions, 24, 48, 72, 144. All right, so once you reach that line correlation setting, this all comes together into formation line and all calculation. When that comes in line center high interference, we take the 4-track provision into a flux in direction. Process calculation lines high center interference comes into the shields and position of the angelics. So Foundation grounds comes into automatic line screen into holographic grid that platitudes its location, right? Process calculates to its positional levels its program, all right? So standing on point view, grid lines at a 45-degree angle in calculation. So this is where all species are interactions now. They're in the holographic grid of the matrix line. Okay, so try to understand this, how this all works. You can see the torque of fields, how it spins its cycles, line screen locations. 24 clocking, 48, 72, 144, right? Now they're here, right? So that's above the ether, it's above the core, it's above the umbrella, and now they're out of the ferments. Now they're in 13 tractions. So that puts some line settings. 13 equals lines into level C. Okay, that's game board. Set correlations of 1, 2, 3 lines of measure and correlation lines of tractions. Okay, getting that communication is to really understand how to use the proven lines. Let's go through all different lines of colors. Okay, so what this does, guys, this balances out your fragmentation screens, your defrags, and all core track interference into line positions. All right, so it's being on a grid screen in a holographic line. We're just going to go through purple and red in correlation lines, the oscillogics. Okay, so they shift. Each panel line sees core center interference as files and tractions and direct signals. Gets you in lines of communication lines. This gets you in a bounce how to use your line seconds, high set location line condition system. The team line, screen line is now going to be, because they have the test that comes up in tractions lines of Q&A, it's going to be 3,000, okay? 3,000 wall screens in position 1 second over pi. That puts positional locations of full 4-track provision lines like correlation settings into solar screen. That puts a solar generator into line screen, adaptation lines of surface. All right, so we go through the green lines, pocket screen location adaptations, change course line size interference, and direct location. Okay, all right. So think that you're on a disco platform, and the lights are basically changing shift lines, anomalies, and your position of block centers are changing time sequence, right? So that provision lines of cycles, sets course center. Let's go through the green line, 1 cycle, 1 center. There's the green. Sets communication lines. Remember, you got to go and secure your line division. I got a 3-line split, lines of anomaly, and lines of purple line. So purple is the rotor-router line rotation that cycle lines, communication cycles, generic screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and tractions. Now in direct line signals, it changes course on the center. So let's go with the Yale, the screen location adaptation, because the teams come into the sun, our routers, and position of the program. Center core lines of birthing, communication lines of 3,000 lines of angles. That's 3 million lines instead of occasional lines and high correlation setting to the sun, masking the core center interference in the female cycles, trackification lines and provision. Sets communication line screens, direct signals. Now the gold cycles correlates attractions, right? We direct lines of 1, 2, 3, lines of 6 over 8 over 9 over 10 over 11 over 12 over pi. Tracks as communication line screens, adaptation lines of surface. Gold surface, track location line, send location to its setting. Has all levels of formation screen lines. All right, so we go through line communication of blue. Blue centers course system. Remember, it's all calculated modified. We come into the holographic grids linings and trackification lines of provision. Okay. All right. So the red comes in tractions and blue comes in tractions at locations. Right. Getting in that position lines, we go into the invisible charts. Now, lines of screen lines is putting process line screen location of spaces into zeros and ones. Platforms that communication lines put 13 lines of LCs in trackification to its game system. Puts position lines as centers, opens all communicate to its setting, all through tractions, comes out through equation. I say now it's coming out through portals and realms. Its own acceleration line sets a line of communication setting. So point lines of tracks, negative over 0 equals lines of 12. Sets lines of 13 platforms, lines of LC, and correlation lines of game boards 1, 2, and 3. Different higher levels of the game, right? So their process of their wings is now open, but they understand the line conditions, how it works with information location to their vessel. And track provision lines, those cycles. So that's how it's set up through the game, through the matrix, right? So the matrix is now tethered in center course setting. So this is the matrix everybody has now. It's a cubical box into a plasma screen. Let's start with attractions. That's the matrix that's inside everybody. All right, so box position of frame lines, choose core lines of track interference, and also has a coloration line screens. It's tethered to all communication lines, line signals, lines of center. Okay. And let's get into purple and line correlation lines of tether and track location setting. The operation system of platform's correlation setting travels, puts all communication at center operation to the system. All right, so I change all those colors in line screens and direct signals to modification lines that keep up the screen. Sets communication lines. I go through communication lines of gold, travel lines, point lines of graph, and center core system into box location. And the center correlation setting. So this takes out the matrix and line frame, takes everything out of a TV frame, takes everything in modification frame, takes everything in correlation frame, takes everything in location phone frame, anything computer frame, line position tractions, and direct signals. All right, so in that core, we change communication lines and directions. Now in that line communication high center locations, we add the screen lines adaptations. It sets up the voice and grid line panels. Let's go through one box rotation, surface, and travel. One purple line screen box. Okay. Sets lines of voice line grids and configuration lines of all the GOV. Let's go into red box and line condition setting, into defrag and fragmentation screen line adaptation lines of surface. So the matrix is growing inside correlation lines, attractions, and high directions. All right, so let's go into gold. So I'm putting all formation screen lines. So let's go to location setting of 3 travels. And directing lines, let's go into the green cycle correlation lines of its matrix center. Process communication of blocks, surface, and travels, and point lines of graphs. Directs modification line cycles, and generation of screen lines, high centers, and rotation. Now, once we get in position of process, everything gets a lot more complicated because now you got a central core system of the matrix that's lines of tether and track locations. All right, so as a provision box, let's go through the lacing line grids. Let's cross the symbols and tractions. 1, 2, 3. Says communication lines of 4, 5, 6, 7, location of 8 lines of channel. Cross lines of 1, 2, and line set location of 4 lines of communication. Now we're going to cross when this cycles in the opposite direct signals. That puts all modification lines to its matrix and travel. Points, lines of graph, calculates line screens. So matrix tethers its communication lines, coming outline signals in a 4-line cycle and line condition of 3 lines of waves. Setting communication line screen location that comes into the sun. Waiting on routers, 1 rotation surface and track location line connected to its portal. Travel points, lines of graph, calculation lines as portal, and line connected to its ground lines and shift lines anomaly and set location. Sets communication line ground lines and high server location setting into line connected to southeast lines of winds and line rotation. Track provision lines of cycles is lines of northeast line communication to its portal and stargates and line communication to its setting of its program set locations. That's how the matrix is set up in your line communication setting and all levels of cortex in same location. All right, got my equation. All right. So it's a lot of setup, right? How the matrix sets things up in set location, your system location, your cortex screens. All right, so wow, but this is how it's set up now. I'm trying to start with that calculations, right? 12 lines of 13 sets on 24, 40, 72, 144. Sets communication lines of 24, 48, 72, 144 clocking setting. Ground center line interference, how to go through the metric meters, correlation lines of scales. Balance communication ground lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 location settings. Ground calculation lines of platforms, 1 setting, 1 rotation, 1 surface. Track location lines of cerebro. See the platforms in correlation. See how they're separate in line screen. See there's 2 levels in track location, right? So that's 13 lines of setting, all provision. So in that position line of track locations, you go through holographic line settings. Okay, so we got platforms of setting. Okay, another platform here. Sets communication lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Points, lines, attractions in all directions in set locations, right? So it platitudes as line screens, points, lines, of track location lines, in provision lines of cycles, and generate the screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. So center core system correlates attractions. This is you and platform, holographic line, game level, level C in track locations, right? Now, there's a dimension line walk line screen that sets lines and dimension lines of door. That sets communications. Level 1, split, 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 3 lines of 4, and position of 4 over 6 over 8 over 10 over 12. Grounds lines, correlates lines, and matrix core lines, center high interference. Let's go through 40 line split lines of communication setting. Process calculates lines of high center interference of 3 line rotations in 6 location settings of travel and point lines of graphs. Direct lines and laser correlation setting, track interference, and high position travel and point lines of high set location. Direct calculates lines, change the colors line screens, set similar levels, Center core line centers and line rotations of Pluto and line rotation surface and tractions. Direct lines and modification lines of 1, set lines of 2, set lines of 6, 8, 10, and 12 set locations. That's one room with traction. Okay, now, getting communication at each level of the game is the process of all lines of division lines of layers that you cross in line communication to its position of this program. But you understand the line set of species has to get in 2447 to 144 once you get in the crystal grid, which they are now in platform communications. It gets all communications to its matrix and tether and line condition setting off the program. 13 formation lines and levels of C and ground settings, operation line cycles, hard correlation. All right, so that's how it's set up, right? It's in the center operation lines of tether and past, present, future. Setting communicator line screens, let's go through line centers. Process calculate the lines of DNA track location, one provision. Or track lines in one cycle, one center, one operation surface. Cross line signals, one signal, one operational line to a half pipe and traction. Calculation lines, grounds, one center, one rotation, one surface, one router. Sets communication lines of 1 XT1000 and traction. Direct lines modification, one cross line signals to another XT1000 that routes the router's line for rotation, surface, and traction. Direct modification lines of all line center high interference, sonar, signal lines of communications position. Over power generation lines, cross line signals, and line condition setting and calculation. Modification cycles lines, we go into the black cycles, correlate to track interference into a black hole that sets communication to its position of program and set location. Process calculates lines, ground line cycles, high correlation setting and track location. Direct modification lines, we go through one signal, one rotation, one router, one rotation surface and traction. Direct calculates lines and correlation setting, but the matrix grid lines. Now by core track division lines of cycles. The interline rotation sets lines of communication lines. Okay, so it's overcrossing signals in line condition to its setting to location to its program. The center core system just basically comes into high correlations of expansion. So the matrix is just growing more lines of communications to its identification code screens. It directs lines of modification to its location grid and travel endpoint lines of graphs. Position lines of process is understanding how to use the indication lines of its box frame and middle frame and track location of high calculation setting and travel endpoint lines of communication inside calculations. Direct calculation lines of the matrix line, box line frame lines, and triangulation lines of force and recognition. Communication setting puts all levels of communications. We got one grid center, one router. Now the point lines of high interference. You got to make sure exactly what's going on, position points and locations. Okay? Direct lines, cross line signals. You got to be very careful that you know exactly where you're going on in line signals and travels in a 4-line signal set location. Okay, so line center of the sun and moon waits on signal, one position, one router, one rotor, and line rotation surface and traffication line condition of measure. Core tracks ground lines, the earth line surface, that's line position of crop circles, line condition setting, and all position of process. Okay? So the matrix itself is just its forming setting. It's coming into more of its indication system. Balance core lines of track centers opens all lines of communications. Higher levels of programming, higher levels of geometrics, higher levels of travels, higher levels of files, higher line communication with setting of its program. So it's into direct lines of communications, data processing lines of files, into data screens, into formation line condition setting, into all levels of process calculation. Okay? Complicated stuff, right? Very complicated when you understand the levels of the game and the location setting of travels. Okay? So it's really starting to identify the platforms when you come into that position locations, right? Starting line conditions 12, 13, because that's where SPACETIMECREATOR is not a line condition setting. Now they got their wings open tractions. They have to learn how to walk the surface lines of grounds into all communications because they got their 12 foundation ground. How to use the immortality, how to use their position of flying and levitating in set locations through its holographic setting. Okay. All right. Getting that communication lines, getting into your positions, they have to understand the data formation screens now. Okay, so location settings of travels. Data screen lines of 1 and line settings of 2 and 4 set locations. Process calculation of 1 center, 2 centers, and 3 line rotators and line condition setting and travels. Center core system of 1 setting, 2 line center rotations of 1 ground, 1 operation surface and traction, and direct lines of high correlation setting of platforms and 4 line condition setting of programs. Again, that communication lines, ground lines, earth line rotation, surface and traction. Balance communication lines, upswing line position location of its program. Data formation lines, box line rotator, lines to location of theta, and process calculates screen lines that takes the location of surface. Process communication lines of the sun, comes into the moon, sets communication lines of its program, into the center core of its space art and track location. Complicated stuff, right? So that's a colossal lines of a torical field that rotates the line center high correlation setting to its moon, that tracks its division location to its platforms communications. Changing lines of colors. Let's go through blue line cycles. Let's take it out through equation at one center operation surface. Okay, so we're just going to work with one line connection setting that puts all communications to its system and travel. Okay, and then we're going to go through all levels, cloak and dagger. Remember, always break these things down when you come in position. Now it's coming out through equation, right? This is coming out, right? See it in the line rotations, right? So you walk on those platforms. All right. So we go in the center core setting. It gets really interesting when you get like center locations of travels, point lines of graphs, center location of grounds in position of 4 panels, and line conditions of magnetic high line screen, high adaptation lines of surface and tractions. Direct lines, highest locations, we come into the blue. Remember, it's a holographic line screen that they're coming into now, right? So the body formation lines are now in liquid formation lines of plasma line setting, 7 bodies of plasma. Okay, they're no longer in the water screen, they're in plasma. That plasma puts position of translucent screens. Operation line cycles and high generation screens. Copy that. Direct lines modification, let's go through line settings. One cycle location centers of travel and cortex lines of calculation. So we got 4 lines of measure, 4 lines of grounds, 2 panels, and line conditions of magnetic high formation form. Position lines of process, course lines of V, see the V line screen. Sets communication lines of vector over screen lines, adaptation lines of surface and tractions. Direct lines of 3 line angles in line rotation setting. Process calculation lines grounds. Operate the cycles, operate the system, operate the center location setting of operation surface and traction. Direct modification lines of high center location of center, operation line center locations, of null signals, of all track location, high calculation. Done by equation. All right. So if you get a correlation lines of tractions as a direct line signals in position location of settings, right? All right. Symbolism, track lines of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. It's all about understanding how to coordinate the lines of traffic flow. Sets communication lines. So you got the cubical line. Okay, and that's what to truly understand how this is all set up in travel. Okay, and then you got the data formation line that sets the course setting. And then you got the metric screen that sets lines of communication. And then you got one line condition setting all through line rotation, surface, and traction. Now, that directs lines that correlation lines of the grounds, sets communication lines of powers, and 2 lines of indication settings, and 3 lines of communication. Directs lines of highest center of platforms 1 in position of 2, 3, and 4 set location. Set calculation lines, line connection lines of high center interference. You can have 4 line communication on both sides. 1 indicates lines of flux in position of 8. Sets correlation. Let's change the channels. 8 settings, 8 settings, 8 settings, and 8 center, and 8 ground set locations. Flux line communications travel lines. Now we go through green cycles. Okay, so we go through the ceiling walls in 3 lines of communication indication, right? Ceiling, right? Track calculation 1 ground line shift lines anomaly and a 3 line split lines of anomaly, ground set location and setting. Process calculation of the grounds, powers, and the atmospheres, and 3 lines of waves. Cross line signals into 2 lines of wave, in line conditions 2 lines of wave location of panels and traction. Tracks modification line settings, puts everything in location system and travel. All right, so in that line condition setting, we come into the blue cycles. That center lines is 1 router, sets communication graph calculations. Now that formulates a 0 line grounds. Okay, so we have the platforms that we have the cross line signals in location of its platform. This direct lines communication setting in all levels of process communication to its position of its program. Center course is system in the astral projections of astral travels and calculation. All right, direct lines modification line cycles, 1 generation screen, we change the blue lines into 4 lines setting left and line conditions right and travel correlations. Puts 8 channels of channels, line condition settings, 1 line router, line conditions at all levels. Sets a magnetic line screen line infinity line rotation. Or the track position, 1 cycle, 1 system, 1 travel, 1 point graph calculations. 3 travel line rotation settings and correlation attractions and direct signals. All right. Now we go in the indicated lines of Pluto in a 3-line rotator. Sets communication lines at 4 settings interactions in settings. Then we go into all communication lines to invisible charts. Direct lines of 3 lines, 4 lines of cycles, 6 lines of 8, 8 lines of location setting. Set up the VR line set location of travel. Sets communication grounds. Go through all lines that correlate setting interactions, directions. Communication of the ground lines into platforms. Now we change all communication lines. The more it comes into visible charts, the more it gets easy through charted waves and line conditions of the webbing and travel line rotation surface and track location system and calculation. Right? Invisible. Right? So it's invisible, but you can still see it coming out in line position. Right? Very powerful. Okay. So how the matrix is set up is the line centers a tether into cortex line. It's a visionary cortex line division. And that puts all communication settings how you go through platforms. Direct lines of high interference that comes into cerebellum. Sets communication lines of communication line equals lines of correlation lines. Let's go into 2 box frames, 3 box frames, 4 box frames, and 5, 6 lines of 7/8. Take equations, lines of highest interference, and line position as program location of file C. Direct lines 1 indicating line setting into 1 rotor, line condition setting to 2 rotors, 3 rotors, and the moon, and surface and track location. Position lines of power, directs lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 locations. Direct lines of calculation of 1 in position of 2 and 3 lines of indication. Set correlated line highest interference platforms 1 setting in positional levels to an XT1000 in travel. Sets lines of grounds in a crop circle line setting high certification setting and calculation. All right, so in that position, we have 1 satellite position. That's 2 tractions and another satellite position. Center core line setting in Fibonacci. It's all communication setting in circle location. Projects calculation lines ground centers, opens all signals in position of ground set location. Sets a power generation line screen. So we go correlation, we set lines at all levels, Pluto track location outline signals. Platforms 1 setting, platforms 3 setting, and platforms communication center of operation surface and travel. Point lines of graphs and certification calculation. Very complicated stuff. Very complicated stuff, right? Right? So I'm just showing you how this all sends you your system lines of your data and how it basically picks up all specification of your files and where the files come in line rotations. If we set a blue line cycle in a 24,000 line measure, put scales and bounds into 3-line split lines and a 4-track provision lines of cycles. Okay, of files. See? So the more you come into the color, the more you come into the matrix. The matrix is based on your rainbow graph. It's the connection of the traffic flow. It's the outer cycles of space. Remember I told you about the truth narrative and the false narratives? Well, that's the matrix. It's the false narratives. So you need more never. So you got to bounce out through traffication when you come in your line provision cycles, when you come into your charter waves and how to communicate with your communication settings, your values, your core setting high interference, and how to use it in calculations. The more you direct lines into your confirmation line cycles, everything gets more in communicated lines and location of your settings. Get you more lines of incognito interactions, right? Take this out through equation. See the center core system waking up through travels and directions of files, lines of screen. Okay. So more coloration, the better it is. Get through line communication and manifestation. All right, starting up line snowy graph interference is a way to go in line position location with settings, but the box frames and the main frames have to have direct line signals at data ports. 3 lines of correlation, lines of height correlation setting and travels. Files line condition setting to its position of its program, right? Center core system is 1 platform, 2 platform, 3 and 4 settings, all right? Sets communication lines of highest interference, dimensional door, dimensional door, dimensional door, and dimensional door and line conditions. Applied to its line screens. Center core lines of the earth and line rotator. Sets communication you going through the dimensional door screen. 1 position, 2 tractions, 3 and 4 settings. Mapping sequence. X marks the spot in box frame into main frame. In line position with the program is sun and the moon. In line position with setting, all of our operation line can setting and config location setting configuration. Okay. All right. Getting value is really understanding how the matrix works. The matrix is a provisionalized cycle. It's the outer line condition setting. So let's go through inner line settings, interception location of dot screens. Point lines of black, we'll go through 3 indicators, and we go through all levels of red into bracket communication of 3 settings. Then we go in position lines, high center interference. That's replication lines of centers, 1 settings, 1 operation, 1 surface interactions. Then we come into 3 lines indicating flux capacitor, 1 signal, process 1 calculation lines, box location frame, point lines of graph, 1 indicate line setting in Fibonacci line setting, and 1 set location. All right. Now, directed lines of communication is a pi setting, operates the cycles, right? Sets course, center, height, interference, begin X2000 in platitude, walks line signals into platitude location setting and travel. Points lines of graph, sonar line position location, scan centers of operation. Sets communication ground lines, opens all signals, allows a line position location of its position of its program. Calculate, modify line conditions, ground lines, high center interference, high position of its program set location of setting to its VR system. Inline communications, change correlation lines of grounds, change communication lines of center, and center position operation lines of application system and travel, and set correlation. Now we go through blue lines of screens, 1 process, calculation setting to travel, point lines of graphs. There's calculation lines. So you have to get into more formation lines, get into the lines that in and out in audio, right? Because it's hologram screen lines. But the more you go in provision line, the more you change communication lines in visible line screens, location, and habitation. Changes all communication to its position of its program and calculation. All right. Okay, so sonar interference, setting line communication with position of the files. Indirect signals locations. All right. Understand how to use the files and line communication setting. Understand how to use the swirls and correlation lines and calculations. Understand the X8000 information lines and grounds into all levels. Inter-satellite communication lines and high center interference and travel point graph communication. All right. See, it's getting more complicated now. All right, complicated is good because it's easy. It's formats in line condition setting. So we're going to go through charter ways of point dots. Now we're going to go through line set location and truth. Start with that correlation. Now, in direct signals, you have to know exactly what's going on in platform communication. 1 setting, 2 setting, 3 setting equals lines of equation. Sets communication lines of position over power. Indicates lines of color. Let's go through 2 indications. That's over cross lines, centers the blue line indication, and travel point lines of graphs. So line conditions, crossing line signals, line condition setting crossing out in location center. Sets position locations, center lines of center location system, a center operation. Sets communication lines above and below and track location. And direct lines of flux, inline set location of center and set point calculation setting of streams. Now, get in that position, you have to stand the center core line setting to its operation surface. Get in that line communication setting is know exactly what's going on in provision. Center core settings, travel correlation lines, attractions, and direction. Calculate, modify ground centers, operation surface, and X2000 travel point lines and graphs. Got a communication line screen, direct lines of tango, foxtrot position line connection setting. In communication setting. Now, cognito and line screen. Let's go through invisible charts in 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 operation surface, and routers and line condition setting position of its program. Okay, direct lines modifications. Going through the consoles, we go through the blue line chain that coordinates the tracks line locations of 2 provisions. 1 cycle, cancel out, line condition setting, cancel out 3 lines of rotation, line condition setting position of its program. Direct modification lines, we go through the equal lines equation, we cross line signals and location setting that travels. All right. Now, getting in that position locations, we go through the green lines. Green lines up, green lines across, cross line signals, and center communication to its position of its program and calculation. Okay, done by equation. Okay, it's very complicated if you don't understand what you're doing through travel, right? But you can see the indication setting of its intelligence, right? Always intelligent information, so you know that. All right, so in that line set of height interference, it's all mechanism lines and navigation screens. Gets all communication in your system calculations. Where you are in consciousness basically puts everything in its position of its program, okay? Let's go through 2 0 lines of correlation interference. Let's go through a line setting location and settings all through travel. Get you guys to understand how to go through Stargate measures, Stargate panels, Stargate portals, 180 key system, and travel point lines of graph calculation screen line. All right, so you got 3 lines of setting in position of 4 set location. And then we got 3 lines of cycles. All right, so that's correlation lines of 7, right? That's 4 over 3 over 7, right? Got that position travel lines. We go in the opposite direct signals and set locations. Okay. Now, getting communication lines of panels is one signal in process at one center, in process at one set locations, in process at two center set locations of travel. Getting that communication lines of center settings, we allocate position timeframes. Now, the center core system has a center lines of one circle, one setting, one set location. All right. So that's communication across line screens, lines of directions in the line communication setting, a space line communication to the setting of its portal. Say it's communication grounds, sets lines of three lines of cycles and traction. Directs lines of modifications, one line, one line, one line, one surface, one track location. All right. So it has a kaleidoscope line and a screen lines adaptation lines of surface. Sets communication lines of highest interference in position location of its setting. Sets off the router, lines off grid, on grid, line communication setting of its position of its program. Okay. So try to understand how this all works in platforms of communications. All three tractions. Okay. All right. Oof, dizzy on that correlation. So knowing exactly what you're drawing has already been understood and understanding to position a program. That's why I need a team to get into your line settings, because your test on Friday is based on the formulas equations. If we get one indicate lines into one flux equals lines of correlation lines of Y center, sets communication lines equals lines of correlation lines of box in calculation screen. Directs calculation into three box locations and three lines of calculating lines of flux location. Change communication lines of grounds, center core system into calculation into line settings into 2x2000 that travels. Platforms one setting and two lines routers and set location, platform communications. Ground centers operations surface in one signal and one set location. One lines of graph, so equals lines of Y equals lines of 6 equals lines of 6 equals lines of 4. Sets communication lines of highest center to 3 equals lines of 4 equals lines of 7. Sets communication lines of 7, 7, and 7 track location. Sets cross lines highest interference in a flux, point lines of graph, and calculation lines of 1 indicates. Cross out the 1, cross out line condition of 6, 6, and line condition keeps the 4. Center core system and travel, point lines of graph into its line condition setting. Here's the hanger. Sets cross line signals, 2 panels, line rotator. Sets car relation setting and travel point lines of graph and 1 set location of setting. Process communication 1 platform, 1 direct signals and set location. Complicated stuff, isn't it? All right. So this is what's expected on Friday. Right? Formula equations. All right. Got to get into lines of settings. You got to get into colossal. You got to get into spin cycles. You got to get into your polarities. You have to know exactly how to go to circulation, rotation. Okay. You have to get into that now. You have to really understand how to get in lines to locations, because it puts everything in process, location, X2000, travel. See? X2000 is a travel. All right, so we get the platforms and lines in direct signal location system, but it's very powerful how you come into more lines of communications, right? Indirect signals to your holographic screens and direct lines of correlations. Getting in that communication setting puts everything in process, especially when you come into the platforms of the hologram. Setting lines of 13, right, which is position of panels, lines of all calculation lines of level C. Process communications, because you come in at 12 lines of foundation. Set lines and higher correlations into higher self, into immortality. 24, 48, 72, and 44, right? You provisionalize the cycles, they're in the higher self and platforms, correlation lines, the matrix grid. That puts them in line position as process communication and setting, notes operations surface location system into their serotonin. They are doping the correlation lines, attractions, and endorphins. In position of travel lines, point lines of graphs, they have to understand the center core system, all levels of operation lines of surface, circulatory, and line condition setting to its platforms of communication. Getting position lines of power, direct lines of signals, know exactly how to get into the navigation lines, how to go through the platforms and travel. Platforms 1, 2, and there is the position of its all levels, comes in position location of its black hole. Travel through location setting. Passing lines 1, 2, 3 track locations. Getting direct lines, setting those of 13 tractions. Set lines according to lines of 14 tractions or 15 line setting. Okay? Sets communication lines as dimensional sail, solar sail, and track locations. 1 center, 1 surface, 1 track location system. Okay? So they have to start to recognize their settings, how to use the grounds of walking, their flyings, and their levitation grounds. So they start off the line condition setting. They go through an excellent align center location XT. Location is at 250, and position of travel lines equals location lines of triangulation box into flux. Okay, into position location 3 weathers, because it's correlated and tracked into 1, 2, and 3 set location. Sets points, lines of graphs, data formation line settings, and pi and generation. Now, getting that position line as the ground lines, the center core system is the circulatory, and line position location of setting is this flywheel, and the line location setting is the atmosphere line screen. Position is process, line position is program. Okay, getting communication lines of router, 1 position, 1 center, 1 operation surface, and traction. Very powerful stuff, isn't it? Okay. All right, so you get the ground centers, stay in the center core system and travel point graphs. Okay. Sites communication lines of grounds, all levels of operations surface, all position location to its position of its program, location to its setting. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? So the coloring, the screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, you outline the cycles. 3 panels, line set, location of settings, and routers. So it's communication to its position of its program. Breaking these things down, guys. Breaking these things down, know exactly what you want to take out through provision, location, and setting, how to communicate with your thoughts, and balance out signals. Always say everything's on standby, everything's on waiting signal. But you don't communicate with everything all at once until you understand the communication of its energy through its frequencies. Now it comes out through equation. Okay, now you see it coming out, right? You see it coming at the bottom, the center location of its atmosphere, right? So step by step. All right, process calculation. That's why I need you guys to get your dimension of solar sails. Now let's get into the inventory graphs. We got a set position of 0 1s. Let's go through 4 zeros. Sets correlation lines of 3 zeros. And cross line conditions of 2 zeros and traction. Directs lines, calculates lines, deletes line, communicates its position, split lines on anomaly. Constant correlation lines of tracking lines and a flywheel track location. See the energetic dome? Boom. Right? Cross line signals, 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 cross line signals. There's the dome. Okay? All through a central line. Drive calculation 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms. Calculation of 1, 2 platforms, and calculation of 1, 2, 3 platforms crossing line signal. Setting communication lines of grounds, set position of 1 center, operations surface, and 3 lines of cycles and crop circles and set locations. Ground center line condition setting, 1, 2, 3 track location. All right. Cross line signals into center line, split lines anomaly of the dome, and a flux in line condition setting to its position of 0 gravity. Sets communication lines of 1, in position of 2, in position of 3, in position of 4, line position operation. Calculation lines, pyramid lines, indirect signals, calculation line screen. Getting communication lines and high center interference and program set location. Okay? All right, so it's just more understanding how to get into what you want to bring things out through equation. All right? How it comes out, right? Breaking things down through coding, guys, that's how you get into balancing your traffic flow. You got something going very, very fast, you have to slow down your space. We already know that through locations. Understand how to control the mechanism of operational lines of levels. And like in the city, we go through an H line screen. Egos lines of box. Egos lines of correlation lines. I've got 2 box locations, right? Box equals H equals box, right? Communicates 1 flux. Correlation track lines of 6 over lines, half pipe positions, core track divisions, online sites, online divisions, and set location. Okay? All right. Cross line screen, and position. All right. Then we have the set lines in position of sun and the moon. So it's all communications, all lines, sight lines, towards center track location and configuration of face line. Okay. So you have to understand, what do you want to take out through provision, right? Slowing down that space, get you a better understanding how to use the mechanism line set location balance. Let's get a balance screen. Egos lines in a triangulation. Let's get into a flux. And let's get into a Y line. All right, there's a flux, there's a Y line. Y line equals line communication setting, opens all communication to its system and travels. Sets communications. You guys have to learn how to get into that flow. They got to get into the controlling flow, the mechanism of this flow, right? You got to get into that location setting now. You got to get into the flow to its energetic line screen, okay? Because everything processes position of balance in set location of settings. The operational lines, its balance course centers and line rotation settings, put to 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 tractions in a 3-line communication setting and 1 center as application. Okay, sets communication lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 platforms into 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. Okay, so getting that position lines gets a lot more balance because the light signatures come into all formation location of grounds. Getting that position location puts everything in space lines of calculations, right? Yeah, bounce correlation setting to Trinity, bounce line setting, location setting, and flux communications, back interaction. There you go, Trinity. Flux communication lines and direct signals to one line connection setting. Y flux, 2Y flux, right? So we have to learn how to really get a line setting, how to indicate position of its program. It sets 1, 2, and 3 platforms, or you got position of 1, 2, and 0 platforms and tractions, right? So you can do whatever you want. You can add lines of 0. This is 1 center, 1 operation, and 24,000 line signatures in seconds, minutes, and hours in traction and set location. Okay. Process calculation line screens of 1 platform, 2 platforms, 3 platforms, 4 platforms, and 6 platforms in set location. Okay. How it indicates the power, guys, power over the mind is the power conception that goes in line screens of grounds. Sets communication lines of swivel, line setting, high set location system, and travel of platforms of communication. Direct lines calculates lines of holographic line, 1 center, 1 operation surface, 1 center correlation set interactions. Set communication lines high center interference. Bounds lines of 0 into line communication 0. Sets lines equals lines of 1 equals lines of 3 in track location. Sets correlation lines of high center interference. Sets communication lines of 0 equals lines of 1. Sets lines of triangulation equals lines of 2. Sets communication lines of grounds and flux and communication lines of vector cross location. Complicated stuff, right? So I'm just showing you how advanced it can be through formula equations, right? How to really understand how to use the inventories. If you get a flux screen, let's get through line chemistry inventories through traffic flow. Okay, let's get in position lines of travels, ether core, and position of 4 tractions, right? Direct signals, right? Cross line signals, line consists of 4 settings. Get a hologram, right? So let's get position travel lines. 1 position travels. Okay, all levels. You guys are in position location to its block system and travel point lines of graphs. You're all in that central core system, right? Now, getting the files is understand the platforms and position lines of travel. Sets communication lines of travel. Sets communication lines of travel. Okay. And set location of holograph line. Getting that position location, so you go through another portal that opens up its wormhole and the black hole and line screen adaptation. Process calculations of 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. All right. So it's all about understanding the holographic grid and how it's set up and platforms of communications. Starting line signals in line position its calculations to all tractions, all through platform. All right. It's the indication lines of 12. That's the foundation. Now you need 13 and 24, 48, 72, 144. Right? Now, it's really interesting how everything formulates and set location to its setting of its image, right, through schematics. To know exactly how to do it, the line communication lines of balance equals lines of triangulation into all levels of flux into Y-line screen, location setting, right? So Y-line screen is a line condition setting that has a taper, that has line center locations and setting at teleportation. Remember, everything that you reiterate puts you in formations of balance. Understand how to use that is a formation of it balance on its own. That's a spectrum correlation lines of traffication lines. Let's go into theta. Okay, let's go into theta, right? There's theta, right? So you have to get used to doing this. There's a point graph right there, right? Right there. See that tip? All right, so you go this way. All right. So you're going this way, but it's direct. You're not going back. You're just direct and redirecting. That's direct. This is redirect. Okay? That's direct. This is redirect. Okay? That's direct. Okay? This is redirect. See how it comes together? That's crossing over. Okay? Set location. You can start with the A line. That's crossing back and over. Okay? See the wave central line communication and setting position of its program, all calculated modified. Now, you can bring in the XT1000s and point lines of graphs and spaces. Wherever there's a space, it sets position location to its tractions and calculation. All right? And this is all through theta. Now, theta is the imagination of its box and frame. Okay? Sets communication lines of high center interference that tethers its coordinate lines of 3-track location. Process communication lines of 1 box frame into 2 box frames in line setting and travel. Points lines of box in line condition setting and correlation. All right? So I'm just showing you how basically you understand the patterns of behavior through a theta line screen. That's a theta line screen right there, right? Through 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set location XT thousands. So that's what the team has to get into, right? You have to get into traffic flow. You have to learn how to get into the 1 equals lines of GOD through its own mechanism location of its voice and line grid to its intel location of its operation. Levels, grounds, correlation line interference of flux. Understand how to use your formulas and equations and correlation lines of track location and provision. All right, so let's go omega. Okay, so there's omega right there, right? Okay, omega. So I'm just showing you exactly how this is all set up, guys. Omega, right? Okay, so 1 signal, 1 operation. Okay, metric meters and 2 panels. Metric meters and 4 panels. See, 2 panels over 4, right? 2 panels, okay, equals lines over 4 traction. Okay, now direct lines of high interference, you have to have 3 cycles, right? Because that provision lines of 7 rotators. Okay, see the calculation system? See the interpretation? See it? Then you ground centers and you open the sequence into elixir, cosmic flame, and serpent fire. There it is. Boom. Boom. You see it? All right. Powerful stuff, isn't it? Okay, so direct lines, and this is all through mega. Remember, mega is an information cycle that position lines of correlation setting, how to open up the sequence on the metric meters. You have to understand how to break down the position to the letters, numbers, shapes, and reiterate it to your system of binary. How it comes into your transistors and your resistors, right? To its operation, to its metric, to its energy line or its existence line, through its gamma signatures or its ground levels of its atmospheres or its awareness. What is it in position lines of travel and set locations? See? Understand? Good. All right. Towers are communication lines of 1, 2, and 3 platforms. Sets communication lines of 4, lines of 6, and 8 platform communication. Calculates lines of mega, sets line communication lines of 1 XT1000 and travel rotor and location setting to travel. Points lines of graph. So we take the online connection to its operation system, open up all channels, and operational lines of space calculation. Look at that. Space calculation. All right. Caps are correlation lines of atmospheres, line conditions of gamma, line is existence in the 3 panels of communication. Travel point lines of graph, 4 lines of 3, and line center high interference, and travel point lines of human residence set location. Wave and line cycles, alpha, delta, theta, omega, and zeta, zeta, gamma, all through radiation. See the wave and line cycles and correlation line attractions and all direct signals, right? All through platforms of communications, right? So the more you get into configuration, the more the traffic flow gets a lot more easier in attractions. But it's amazing how you come into your formulas, right? Look at that. Look how powerful that is. All through platforms, all through crop circle, all through correlation, all through pi, all through set calculation, modification, screen lines. Because I know exactly what it is, you know, through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. So all you're doing is basically, let's go through an line, backwards force line, into split lines of 3 tractions, right? Pi generations of all lines, split lines of sonar, correlation lines of radiation, line condition setting, and process communicates split lines, correlation, and track location, right? So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set location. Satellite of 1 and line rotation setting and track location. All right, sonar communication lines of grounds, sets communication lines of center, operate the surface, operate the center, operate the correlation setting and track lines and provision of cycles. Very complicated stuff, right? But if you look really, really close, you can see the intelligence, information, ground centers, and travel right inside. So it's amazing how you see it on 4-line split, correlation lines, attractions, applications. All right, so directing lines of signals, routers and routers. Everything has line condition setting to in, out, and audio, 3 lines of waves, right? So let's go through alpha, let's go through delta, and let's go through theta, right? So alpha tone, line condition equals lines of 1. Delta, line condition setting, equals lines of 1. And position locations, all of the theta. Let's go through alpha, equals lines of delta, equals lines of theta, equals lines of 1, and track location, right? Setting communication grounds, circulation, rotation, line center location setting, and one position process calculation setting attractions. All right. Everything is created through a hologram, all through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. The more you understand that, the more it gets easier how to get in that instruction setting in position location your own calculate, modify, indirect location system, how all lines of signal location of holographic grid inside locations, how to travel through that, right? So that's the walking sequence line screen, right? The holographic screen line. Understand the holographic line screen is all adaptation lines of surface and track location of the settings through portals and stargates. And how to travel through that through line can be keys to its setting. Operation and servo keys to its position to its platforms. Okay, very powerful stuff, isn't it? You guys are gonna have to watch this again. It's too powerful. And this is all through a 24 ground center, guys. This is a 24 grounds. Look at that formula, look at the equations. Complicated stuff. All right, directing lines of signals gets all communication lines. Once you get into traffic flow, things get a lot more easier and under more understandable. Setting ground lines of 24 lines of cycles. Platforms line setting in position 0 correlation. Getting into the flux and have 3-line waving line rotators. 6 correlation lines of 2-track location. It says communication lines, 1 signal, 1 operation, 1 surface. Okay, so we ground centers. We go through security line defense. All right. All right, so we go position location, part accelerator. We go with the round cycles in round center in rotators, 1 line signal, all those all cross location and channel. And we do through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 panels of traction. Now, in that direct signal, it gets more complicated now because you have a lot more tethers coming out. Okay, data highways, formation highways, Omni highways, galactic highways. Then you get into the planes, existent planes, non-existent planes, track location lines. This is the acceleration line connected webbing and track location line system. Has a light indicator, line condition setting, 1/10 frame and line position levels. Opens all signals, all line position location accelerator. That particle lines its communication lines of this chamber, line position of past, present, future, and set location. So try to understand what's going on, people. All through the matrix. The matrix basically can form and shape anything in setting location of seconds, minutes, and hours. The one thing that stays in position lines of travel lines is the nothingness of location to its system through its mind system, all through its operation surface and track location, its calculation to its system. All right. Okay, so let's go through the platform. Let's go through security lines of valves, 1 position lines of 2, 3 lines of 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 set locations. Track provision lines of cycles. Let's go through the center core system. Let's go line center location of setting in positional process. All right. Okay, so we go through the data screens. Now we go through green inhibitors, process calculation lines and line condition indications. Let's go through the round cycles. Now the green indicates the matrix line. That's high inhibitors over pi that generates the calculation system and code screens into webbing line sequence and travel endpoint lines of graphs. Okay. Gets communication lines. We get the XC1000s coming in tractions. Point lines of 1, point lines of 2, point lines of 3, point lines of 4, location setting. Okay. Process communication ground lines, center core system, center core system, center core system, scan settings, and high correlation setting to travels. Okay. So once you stand the accelerator view, everything gets much easier through chambers. Now you go through the center core system and center calculation. So once you understand more of that, it gets a lot more easier to understand the platforms that you go through, okay, to get to where you need to go in line conditions to travel. So it's communication grounds this way, okay, in settings. Now you can go in line conditions setting of center core system, starships of command in line setting, okay, different levels of tractions, different levels of platforms, command centers, stargates, star portals, starships, any of that application in the system, all through platforms A, B, and anything through hangars, line screen, location, adaptation lines of surface, right? But I'm just showing you exactly how you go through different platforms in the location system, where it's all set up through the cortex. But it's very complicated once you understand more lines of formula, the higher line position setting, especially when you go through the accelerators. But I just wanted to show you how powerful that is, where you can see the platforms and how this is all set up, so you can understand more lines of the mind line and how it's served location system. Once you come into the travels in track location setting and all levels operating location setting through XC1000 tractions. Okay, how everything is set up through an inventory through traffic flow, right? Okay, so let's go through film strips of 1 and film strips of 4. Split lines of 1, 2, split lines of 1, 2, and 3 and tractions, right? Three center correlation settings, 1, 2, and 3 settings. Sets communication lines of 1 and 2 track location. All right. This is the center line. Remember, this is the transit. Okay, this is the transit. This is what everybody's trying to understand. Why is the equal sign? What is the equal sign? Now you understand what's the transit to your habitation zones of the Earth. The Earth is here in tractions and directions. That's the Earth, right? It's center course system. But you have to stand the equal line setting. It sets course system and travel point lines at graph calculations setting to travel. Okay? Points, lines, of setting. Sets communication lines, high center interference, split line anomaly, flux of capacitor, and 3 lines of waves. Sets communication lines of 4 and 5 set location of waves. Sets communication lines of pi and set calculation. Direct lines of cycles, 1 center, 1 operation lines of pi and generation screen. Sets calculation lines, so you have the platforms 1, position, 2, 3, and 4 settings of travel. Sets lines of 5 line set location of travel. Cross line signals, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. Direct lines, calculation lines, and ground lines into 1, 2, calculation line centers into 3, image cross lines of 4, and track location. Process calculation line cross line signals into 1, in position of 2, into 3, and 4 lines of cross line signal. Process communication ground centers operate the surface location setting in process calculation. Very complicated stuff, okay? All done through the mind. It gets more complicated when you go to higher lines of holographic screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Understanding more communication and setting that comes all through platforms communications. Ground centers of 1, 2, and 3 line rotation. Process communication of the sun and the moon comes on line setting, waiting on signal, line comes to a setting position of its program. Sets communication line center location of ground centers into crop circle line can high center location of 0 setting in track locations. But I'm just showing you exactly. This is just black and white, right? But in configuration, it's knowing exactly how to center course system and all of the travels, 3 graph calculation lines into traffic flow and position. How it comes out through its equation, right? Okay, so as long as you understand the indication lines of security, blue is plasma, and line condition white is the cloak and dagger, you're good to go in location setting. That comes out through equation, right? 3 indicate line screens, direct signals, all through platforms, right? Okay, so that's what the team's coming into is more lines of, out of the line centers of foundations and more on the mine lines and the colorations. It gets much easier when you understand the rainbow graph screens, location traffic flow. Direct lines and communication lines. They come in at a cloak and dagger into visible chart screens and high adaptation lines of surface and traction. It comes out through equations, right? Okay, very powerful stuff. All right, so breaking these things down puts everything in provision. Helps you to guide you to understand how to use that traffic flow, right? Understand the inner lines and the outer line rotation centers. Getting that position locations, your formulas get a lot more complicated, but a lot more fun. More understanding how to go through coding and webbing and weaving. Anything through lines of tweaking wires or direct line signals. If we get an offline rotation into 3 cycles, okay, 3 line router, line rotation, surface attractions, right? Okay, so those are indicated right away in security line, security line, security line, right? Right away, right? Then we come into the blue plasma, right away, right away, right away, okay? And then once you get into that, let's say you got an orange line in the center core system. Here's the orange. But there's an indicated line at a red dot. It says position of travel line, right? Right there. It's combustion. It's not supposed to be there. You see it, right? Right? That's an override. So in that communication lines and overcharge or location line calculating setting, you got to set the course, indirect signals, modificates ground lines, you get correlation to interference, send electrical lines of wire, platform communication lines to earth, inline center location, 60,000 comes in, line signal location system, puts travels, lines and mechanisms, lines of 3 travels, in position location has 6 lines of communication time, position its program. Text lines, modification lines, puts the causal correlation setting back in tractions, puts the security line, takes out the equation line interference, sets up communication lines, tractions, high center location system, and travel. Done by equation, right? It's back to its set location setting, right? Takes out the cluster, security line, right? Scan position lines, electrical lines, and high correlation setting tractions, right? Now, if you want to come out in tractions and direct signals, you go through the invisible lines, charter ways, core track interference, and position of balance. Direct lines and signals comes out through the location system, right? Everything's a hologram, guys. The more it gets easy, the more you get into coloration, the more you understand the matrix, how it works in setting. Everything comes out through platform, okay? But it's really fun when you get a more lines of communication, how to use formulas at a higher level. Very high level. Very, very high level. Okay. And then you really understand how to use it through the inventories and its binaries and transistors and resistors. As long as you understand the travels and direct signals coming in, that correlation setting is direct and redirect. Okay. Direct and redirect, but it's in the same location, right? Different locations, right? Center core system here never leaves the setting of travel. This is the mind line adaptation. This is you and the body line communication to a setting, right? Process coming from here to here. This is from here, and this comes back to here, and this comes to the center. The more you come closer to the mind, the more you come into volume, the more you come to balance, the more you come to setting, the more you come to the center of operation surface. Okay, 3-track visualizer cycles. All right. Getting in your inventories and really understand how to use your binaries and transistor location, your settings, all through location of patterns behavior, right? Everything's a pattern behavior. Okay, it doesn't matter if you don't know the game itself, but you have to know the game of you. It's not understand the game itself, it's understand the game of you. Understand the wavings, the cycles, the correlation setting, the dimensional door screens, all lines of communication nodes, waving lines, screen lines, adaptation lines, how to get out through its equation. Yeah, it's a map, right? All right, so center core system, you're here. Okay, you're there, right in the spot line, right? All right, so you go this way, you can go through this way, up to this. Hey, I got out, right? There you go. Boom, you're out, right? Now you go this way. Nope, I can't go that way. Nope, I can't go that way. Nope, can't go that way. Nope. So you're going through all different dimensions. Oh, I'm out, right? So one way, another way. One way, another way, right? So this is direct, and this is redirect. And that's all you're doing through line condition setting through pi interactions, right? Direct lines, split lines, anomaly, cloud line, screens, and direct signals modification and travels. Point lines, graph, characterizing lines, and waving line cycles, location line condition setting to its clouds. See the clouds, the line communication to its position of the probe case setting. That's what you see through indications, right? XT1000s are in platforms in position on standby. They're inside the cloud screens. Setting communication lines like crowds, lines, and high center interference of positional process. So it's a mapping sequence when you get into factory relation line communication setting, infrastructure location of system of travel, point lines that calculation line. See the communication lines of face? What do you go to track revision lines of high cycle location setting travels? Okay, setting position location, there it is, interactions, intelligence. Face recognition, right? Face recognition, right? 2 face recognition line screens, right? Protecting anything that comes in as sentient view and travel. Can't come in while this location setting because it's a protecting system, right? So I just want to show you, the more you go to the higher line screen, the more it gets into the cortex line, the cerebral and the cerebellum. Understand your endorphins and all lines of modification, screen lines, adaptation lines, operation line system. This is on an initial point in information lines of AI, how to direct the signals inside location your settings. It's all levels of process calculations. If you get a film strip line, that's across the signals, and a 4-line communications, split lines, anomaly, center core system, and platform. So line setting, line, center line, rotation, surface interactions, right? Direct lines, modification setting, ash projections, and travel. It's applications. Sets communication lines of 1 into half pipe. Okay. Sets all communication setting to its position of its program. All right, so direct lines of 1 XT1000 comes interactions, XT2 20,000, and XT 50,000 line setting. And process calculations. Ground centers, always in position lines of high center interference. Scans position always in the center core setting. Everything you do through line communication thoughts, interactation lines in high center location codes operation, that's application, all right? So it's important you understand how to use your traffic flow and line conditioning your clouds and line communication setting to your system of the mind itself, right? And that's what's inside clouds, just the locations of the factory. All right, so once you understand more levels of that, and you understand the platforms of XT1000, your highway screens, all through theta communications, you understand how to process that. The higher lines of high correlation starts with the cortex line. Codex, let's do the codex, codex location setting. And lines high interference is syntax and solar text. That's cross-line signals, solar text. Okay, and line calculation setting into combatute screen. Direct calculus line initiate and run program. Now that line location, how often do you want to run that program? You want to run it on 45 angle. You want to run it on a 5th line screen. 3 box location centers and triangulation, 1 triangulation line set location of travel. So it's all about understanding how to use the triangulation on split lines of 3 settings, or split lines of 4 settings, or split lines of 4 settings, or split lines of 4 set location settings. Sets position of travel point lines of graphs, right? Data highways and process in line condition setting, 4 cross-line conditioning intersections. Indirect signals, modification of 3 lines of flux and travel. All through codecs. Okay. Oh boy, I'll tell you. So this basic understanding of how to get into the bold of yourself. Let's get into line set. Let's just start off with L line condition setting travels, point lines of graph, calculate lines. L line screen gets complicated, right? Where's the T? So we L line screen there, travel point lines of graph, sets communication. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a film strip lines of the and turning it into a graph, into a set correlation lines and modification lines of travel. Okay, I'm turning everything into travel through the E line screen. Turning everything line connection to its travel and set locations, right? You're turning the E's, you're turning the H, you're turning the line settings and travel and point lines of graphs. Okay, T line centers, let's cross line signals, half pipe, and line conditions cross line signal locations. Let's take the L shape and the 3 line router, line conditions set location and setting. I'll process calculation, right? Sets lines of grounds, sets lines of communication on platforms and set calculations. Ground centers, power centers, operation lines of surface track location. Direct modification lines, just cross the platforms and 4 settings, 1, 2, 3, 4 set locations, all right? Getting direct line signals, bringing the sun, bringing the moon, okay? Because you guys are going to get to higher, more point graph communication, how to do direct lines of communication to the sun now. You're in the center position here, crossing line signals, trying to understand more lines of the lines, the higher levels of the mind of the sun and track location. Going into the deeper core of the sun, right? So getting in that position line, when the sun gets in calculation of its router, its own line condition of its own traffic flow, it directs location of your settings to your mind, adapts the system location to its constellation screen lines of its nothingness. Putting all communication lines at ground centers, understand how to go through a black hole, understand how to get out of a black hole. So getting into a black hole line screen and getting out of provision lines, of course, central piece to its setting. All through provision, right? So the sun is going to get you in projection through its projector. No, exactly. And the moon's going to get you into more lines how to put the projector together. We got a cross line screen and direct location. This is how it's set up. Okay, this is the sun, this is the moon. Okay, that's how it's set location. It comes out this way in directions. Oh yeah. That's how you see it, right? Platforms 1, 2, and direct locations right over left, cross lines, left over right interactions, direct signals, right? Comes modification, sets up the platform. That's what you have. The equal line is the platform to set up the hologram. So you can actually see the structure that you come into its holographic setting. That's how it comes in position. That's how you see the actual intelligence. So you communicate with it right away. You understand the grounds. It's in red. It's in its security. It's in its plasma, already interactions. So it's comes out, right? Once it comes out, you communicate with it. Set up the line position locations in and out and audio. Every intelligence has in and out audio and track locations, right? Now we go through all levels, invisible, because it doesn't identify you until you identify your own setting and set locations. Now it comes out through calculation. Now you can see it. Now you see the hologram coming out, talking to you, right? So it comes out. Now what it's doing. This is what it does. Once it recognizes you, it comes out of its platforms of communication of travel. So its communication lines setting in line position to its program. Sets communication cross lines, sets communication to its system and all of calculations. Then it recognizes more lines of platforms with you and has fun with you through communication. That's what it is, interactions. You have to understand how to set up through this hologram, right? The basic grounds is how to set up the projector of the sun and the moon. Let's go through profile correlations and the line connection setting. Have its campus above line locations in the memory bank. Position of process and profile. Sun correlation, moon calculation. See-through calculation, line screens. Right over left, left to right. That's how you see the hologram. Right? Everything's on standby, but this is what you're talking with, right? Talking with everything all at once is too confusing unless you understand how to ground the hologram setting. And you have to understand the more the mechanism line screen, because everything is at different frequencies. And once you understand the frequencies, then you understand letters, numbers, shapes, and setting. This is going to blow you away with this one. Everything has its own alpha, omega, micro, and macro, all through a one indicate setting. Alpha, omega, micro, macro, right? That's what everything through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols have. They have their own alpha, omega, micro, macro. What do you think of that? Blows you away, doesn't it? all through its awareness, all through its operation, all through its memory, okay, and all through its mind, okay, adaptation. Okay, there it is right there. That's what it means in attractions. Facts, okay, all calculated modified. All calculated modified. Memory of the mind, awareness of its awareness, awareness of its opening, awareness of its operation, how to indicate its position of its platforms, guys. Understand how to use the alpha, mega, and the micro, and the macro. That's what it means in operation line cycles. Platforms as setting, platforms as setting, platforms as setting, in position locations, putting out, modified, turning it into a hologram. Boom. That's all it is, nothing else. That's why you have the Earth. Why do you have the Earth? Because it sets up the platform. Okay, why do you have the center? Because it sets you in the operation. Why do you have the atmosphere? It sets you up in the highways and track use of travel. Boom. That's all it is, nothing else. Okay, how to set up a hologram. That's it. That's why you have the Earth. Okay, this is your Earth, right? That's your Earth, right? So you have to stand the transits, the divots. Okay, it's the platform. That's all it is, just a platform. So once you enter the cross symbols, you go to higher lines of communication, right? So that's here, cross line, higher lines of communication, right? Or you cross here, higher lines of communication of platforms, right? Or you cross here, higher lines of communication of platforms. So you're learning to basically understand how to travel through set location, right? But you have to understand the 24, 48, 72, and 144 platform, which is the crystal grid that everybody's on in track location, which is its holographic setting now, okay? Which is this matrix game in track location, it's holographic screen, okay? That's all this is, 24 clockings, 48 frames, 72 computer frames, and 144 grid. So it's all communication and setting, all levels of operation, surface, and traction, okay? So, in basic understanding, all spacing lines and all direct signals is now in center course setting, okay? So getting into that position puts everything in track calculation lines to its platforms. They're here now, okay? They're right here. That's where they are. So they're 24, 48, 72, 144. They're on a crystal grid now, right? Into the higher self, into the immortalities. Now they have to understand how to direct location send it to the vessels, how to use it through modifications, how to understand the location to its cortex, and design line. Get in that position, how to use it in waving line cycles, into the alpha, and position omega, into micro and macro charter waves, and to location setting and calculation. Get in that position, puts them all levels of calculations. Plus, they also have to get into their connections, all levels of their dimensional sails, not their solar sails. They're in dimensional sail. All right. So they just have to really stand. So when you get a formula of indicated one, okay, you have to understand that it has to travel through its D and its X location. There's a solar sail. Point tractions, indirect signals, and 3 lines of correlation setting calculations. So direct lines is going through its past, present, and its future. That's all it is. Set correlation of the sun comes into the moon in line, position, location, with setting to travel. Okay, it's constantly traveling, right? So I want you guys to identify that because that's exactly what you see this sun and the moon. There it is. Traveling, right? Oh, there it is again. Traveling, right? It says communication lines of 1, 2, and settings. 2 platforms go in this directions and 3 line communications. Direct lines, sun moves this way in line position of its program. Okay. Oh, let's move in this way now. In line position location of its operation line cycles in this way. Oh, it's moving cross line connections now. Up the higher correlation lines of dimension lines of space. Oh, now it's going through ground centers, all through operation lines of service application and crop circle. Okay. Getting direct lines is knowing exactly how to set up your projector to your projections. And it all aligns its communication, sending how to use your sun and your moon through all levels of your perspective and how you see things in all line connections set it to its surface. But you have to understand how to indicate that through line set is a 12 foundation, 13 lines of set location higher self, clock is at 24, 48 frames, 72 computer frames, 144 crystal grid. They're their interactions in the matrix grid line screen of a holographic set locations and travel. Okay? All right. Hope you guys had fun. Yeah. So a lot has been said. We're finally getting to understand what's going on with our platforms now and how to really indicate that through our vessels. The better we understand that, the better we understand our clocking system. But I'm just showing you exactly, okay, in position locations, how you come into your formulas. In all position location in your settings, understand location of your travels, and calculate to its formula of its equation. Very high division line screen, okay? Very high division. And that's just through a 24 platform. So start understanding how to travel through your letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols team. Get into higher correlation lines of settings. Get into higher communication to its position of its program. Start to understand how to use your inventories, your transistor resistors, locations. Get aligned communication lines and locations to your defaults. Get a communication lines enabled, like to its all. The more you come into copy, the more you come into paste, the more it gets much easier in line communication setting to embed it and position to your system all through tractions. All right. See you in 5.